Warning: MF Uncensored contains adult language and discussion. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to MF Uncensored. If you guys are listening to us on the go, you can find us on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and basically anywhere you get your podcasts. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Paul. With me in the studio is the world famous, the most well known, the person who puts all these things together and then fixes them when I try, producer Melanie. Melanie, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you?
Oh, just living the dream. Just living the dream.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday indeed. What a week it's been.
Yeah, it's been a long week.
It's been a long week. It's going to be even funnier when I release this episode on a Wednesday and people are like, it's not Friday.
So happy Wednesday to our listeners.
Happy Wednesday on our release day. But we are excited. We're very excited because we have somebody via Zoom, because that's how you do interviews. That's how you do it nowadays. Nobody sits in the same room anymore.
I know, it's so hard, but this is the best way to do it because we're able to connect with so many people
all around
the world, which is really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
One of the positives out of this craziness.
So this gentleman, I think we connected about a month ago, and just we had something scheduled, and then we had COVID scares and holidays and then work and then this, and we finally, I have to say that there's nothing cooler than trying to set up an interview with somebody and they're like, I'm good. Like, you want to do this Friday? I'm like, I guess we'll do this Friday. This was 2 days in advance. And that is Mr. Joel Caroll. Joel, how are you today?
I am well. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it really is our pleasure. And we're going to explain why in a minute. So Joel is an author, and he has written a book called The Book of Joel, which it's like the perfect title.
Yeah, it came together perfectly with my life and the way everything panned out for me. And just the title itself sticks out because so many people have heard of it being a biblical story.
Mm-hmm.
So the way my life transpired, it was perfect.
It's funny because when I first Googled it, that's what came up first. But luckily, you had sent your link with your first interview or your first email to me. But I remember just like Google. I'll just Google the Book of Joel. I was at work, and it was like it was the Bible verses. And I was like, wait a minute, I don't think this is right. It's one of the best-selling books ever. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory before we even jump into the book, so our listeners can kind of get to know you a little bit.
So my father was in the military. I was born on Friday the 13th, on a weekend of a full moon in Phoenix. And my father was in the military, married, had an older sister, and we moved to Virginia when I was young, and then ended up moving to Europe a few years later. And when I was in Europe, I had some situations that carried with me all the way till I'm almost 44 years old. Having some demonic presences around me that other people weren't seeing, and the children around the neighborhood didn't see as well, or didn't have that sixth sense or that ominous feeling. I love sports. I played soccer in Europe for 3 or 4 years.
Oh, wow.
I went skiing in Austria, in the Alps. I was in a commercial in Amsterdam. So that stuff was cool. But also at that time, I was like real curious. So I would go around and like start fires, and I started stealing when I was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a thief for 28 years. I was an impatient young man. I wanted things yesterday. And if I didn't have the means to get what I wanted or what the other kids had, I would take it. I also had a close friend of mine when I was 7 years old. About 16 hours after I had a demonic presence in our home tormenting me, I was going to tell him after school, and I just didn't have the courage to do so. So when the bus stopped in Belgium and he got off, I remember waving to him. And then later on that evening, my mother told me that Michael passed away from a bee sting in his throat, and he was allergic to bee stings.
Wow.
So I had a lot of questions about life. My mother believed in God. She spoke of God. We weren't church going folks, but she always believed in the Lord. And I prayed about it because I'm like, okay, I have these spirits coming after me. I see shadows. My best friend passed away at the age of 7. Like, what God would do something like that. And I prayed. I prayed when I was little, and there was no light shining down. There was no loud voice being like, I'm here to comfort you. This is what had happened. So a lot of questions as a child, and I was an extremely deep thinker. And then we moved back to the States, to Phoenix. And around that time is where I had my first blackout. by being uncomfortable. So I was being pumped up by my friends to fight this kid after school, and they pushed me into a large circle of kids, and I was terrified. I didn't know anything about fighting. I loved the Karate Kid at that point in the '80s. My favorite movie, watched it 1,000 times. And I watched boxing with my father, military man. He was a boxer. He was a drinker. And the only thing I knew about fighting was watching these guys fight on the television, whether it was a movie or on pay per view. And I got in there and I tried to do the old karate kick, Daniel LaRusso crane kick, and I missed and everybody laughed at me, but I blacked out. A long story short on that, I ended up beating the kid with a painted rock on a tee off green at the golf course by our school, but I don't remember that even to this day. And then I snapped on his friends the next day when they bullied me and called me crazy and wanted to be karate kid and they were making me cry. And I chased them through the neighborhood into a house, and then I punched through a large window in this vacant house's living room, and I tried to stab the kid in the head with a piece of glass. I wasn't ever violent for no reason. Something happens to me when I become uncomfortable and I can't handle situations that baffle me.
Mhm.
But then I would go about my business and I would be a kind person to everybody. But the second I got uncomfortable, I didn't know how to handle it and I black out. So then we moved to Virginia again, where my father was stationed at the Pentagon. And it was anxiety and depression all over again from having to move around and pack up my little world with my little friends and everything, my little schedule that I had.
Mhm.
And I would have to rebuild that. And it was an extremely difficult thing to do as a child, always moving around and unpacking, going outside, the fear of the unknown, little kids in these new neighborhoods of, they would pick on me because I'm a very small dude and I was smaller than my girlfriends and I had buck teeth and people would call me rat boy, can opener, beaver boy, even kids' mothers in the neighborhood would call me names and I would hear it when I was ringing their doorbell. But in saying that, I ended up always having a large group of friends
Hmm.
everywhere I went. And I got into sports really big in basketball, baseball. That was like my passion, collecting baseball cards, sports cards, and getting really good at breaking down stats in sports. So, like being a sports center broadcaster was like my goal, or to be on a major league or one of the four national, sports leagues. But I never grew and I stayed small. And basketball ended up being my escape for everything.
Mhm.
And I was pretty good at basketball, and I tried out in high school. Everything was good up until the point where Prince William County, Northern Virginia, outside DC, the school zoning commission, they changed the school zone. So like 200 feet from our front door, if we lived on the other side of these mailboxes on this dirt road, I had to go to Garfield. My sister went to Woodbridge High School, where all my friends were transitioning to ninth grade. I ended up not being able to go with them. So again, there goes depression, there goes anxiety, the fear of the unknown. Super intimidated walking into this high school. And there's thousands of kids in there. It wasn't like the middle school where
Mhm.
Mhm.
everybody's happy go lucky. It's a middle school. These are
Mhm.
gangs. This is solidified gangs. This is dope. This is violence. Beautiful females that look like the women in the Playboy magazines I was stealing from my daddy when I was 12 years old. Like I was intimidated for sure. I was 4 foot 11, 88 pounds, something like that. And they were like, "Are you in the right school?" So as time went on, I was still playing basketball for AAU and Boys and Girls Club, and I was practicing every day at this rec center down the street from our house. And I would just dribble down there, dribble home. And one day I was sitting on the bleachers after playing, and there were some kids in the high school, so I was getting a little bit more comfortable being around these people in the high school because they were still at the same rec center. And I was watching these young men play basketball on the full court. And I just admired it. I
Mm.
liked the way they carried themselves. I liked the way people respected them. I liked the way they played basketball. I liked the way they spoke. I liked the way everything about their lifestyle. So one evening I was dribbling back home to the house and I put my ball down, took my shoes off, and I looked over, and two of those young men were on my couch talking to my father, who worked at the Pentagon, and my mother, who worked at a bank, and with my older sister. And my father was like, "Come in here." So I went in there and I'm kind of like anxious and like, what are they doing in our house? My father said, well, this is so and so, your sister's boyfriend. Want to go ahead and introduce you. So my mind was going everywhere again as a deep thinker. Like, I'm like, wow, what are these dudes doing in there? And they're gang members. And her boyfriend ended up putting me under his wing, but didn't want me affiliated.
Hmm.
But as time went along and I tried out for the Garfield basketball team, I was way out of my league. And they were like, you shouldn't even be in the school, man. You look like you should be in middle school or elementary school. And it broke my heart because basketball was my passion in life. It was my escape from myself. And that's when I ended up reaching into my parents' liquor cabinet and pulling down a bottle of tequila early in the morning, pouring it in a cup, and then going to my mother's ashtray by the fireplace and putting it in a little sandwich baggie, stealing a lighter and going to our bus stop. And I lit up my first cigarette and I poured my first drink down my throat. That ended up being a 20-year war with addiction. And I also lost my virginity to my next door neighbor soon after. So there was no more collecting baseball cards, going to card shows. It was like I am addicted to the way a woman feels, and I'm addicted to the way this liquor makes me feel.
Mhm.
And I started going around more gang members in a different part of Woodbridge, again, with no friends that I went to middle school with. And I was becoming close to a lot of the young men that played basketball there. And eventually they were all getting initiated into the gang that I wanted to become a part of.
Hmm.
And then my sister's boyfriend gave me an alias because I was bringing, the more confident I became, I got a beautiful girlfriend from West Philly. We had the same last name. People thought we were married. So I'd go to her mom's house and kick it with her and her three sisters. And then when Big Bro would drive back from Philly, I would jump out a window and run to a friend's house and then sneak back. And I had guns pulled on me, had guns put in my mouth on the street. Her and I were walking from 7-Eleven one day after school and SUV pulled up and they walked up to me and threatened to kill me. It was a neighborhood where a lot of gang members lived and they were testing me to see if I was going to run away, but I just never did. All the meanwhile, my parents thought I was this good kid. Still, I am a good kid, but I'm trying to fit in somewhere now. Like I really want to be loved, and I'm searching for something that I wasn't getting in my home. So my sister's boyfriend gave me the alias Omen, Omen. And right there, it just blew my mind because I was born on Friday the 13th, weekend of a full moon. My name is biblical. Here's Omen, the scales, evil and good. But when he gave me that alias, I ran with it.
Hmm.
I ran with it. He made me a shirt, go hard, go home, the Omen on the back. People thought I was affiliated, but the gang members were like, who is this scrub, man? You know what I mean? Like, he's not part of what we're doing. But when something would happen to me in the school, those guys would walk up and kind of warn the other people, like, yo, that's so and so's little bro. You kind of want to back up. You don't want to mess with him. And I love that feeling. And I wanted it more than ever. And I went to get affiliated, and they laughed at me. And I got hit in my temple so hard that I flew down the steps at this undisclosed location, and it hurt me. I'd never been hit before, and I couldn't open my mouth for a week. I'm colorblind, but I saw purple out of one eye, and I knew it, and orange out of another eye. For like the first time, I knew what the colors were, but they wouldn't go away,
Hmm.
and it made me depressed. Smoking a lot of weed, drinking a lot of alcohol, still a klepto. I would go to 7-Eleven and steal Black and Milds and alcohol all the time. And everything I ever went through, I would drink and use. And I would sleep around because now people are like, yo, that's so and so's little brother. He's dating this female who's beautiful female, and he's not leaving these neighborhoods. So now I'm sleeping with multiple females. When the gang is getting in fights in school, I'm jumping right in the middle of it and the whole crowd and committing acts of violence that were pretty disturbing in front of everybody, just showing like this is who I am. And there was a time I was walking down the hallway with my girlfriend and she wasn't happy with me and she was wearing a leather jacket of some other dude and I ended up grabbing her arm and breaking her thumb. I didn't mean to do it, but I snap when I'm uncomfortable. And then a teacher grabbed my hoodie off my head one day while I was walking with my girlfriend, pleading with her to stay with me. But she choked me with my headphones because back in the early 90s, we didn't have these nice
Mhm.
earphones that we got now. So she kind of choked me. I didn't know who it was, and I grabbed her by the bangs and I bashed her skull against a brick wall in the hallway. I didn't know it was her. If I saw who it was, I wouldn't have did that. But she put her hands on me, and I felt again uncomfortable, and I snapped. So my parents are now starting to get calls from the high school saying, "Look, your son's committing acts of violence. He's not going to school. He's walking the hallways. He's just talking to girls," and they didn't know what to do. So I went and I got affiliated, and I just did it. And the second that that happened, I felt like I belonged. I felt important. And then I was hanging with these guys that I looked up to and admired and observed on the basketball court and in the hallways at high school, and I became one of them. Now you got Omen running around here with an umbrella, which is the gang, for me to make a name for myself. And even though I had people coming into the high school that graduated, that got out of the gangs, would come in and share their testimony and say what not to do and encourage us young teenagers not to follow anybody else's footsteps and be a unique individual and follow our own passions. Unfortunately, my passion was to follow these other men. And there was a lot of death in my life. There was a lot of death. There was a lot of violence when I was in high school. I committed a lot of violent acts, and then I got pulled out of high school and sent to Arizona, where my relatives are. But when I did that, I ended up stealing from my grandparents. I was stealing from aunts and uncles. I'm being passed around from family to family. And the intervention and a plea from my parents to save my life. And I ended up doing a lot of dope when I was out there and catching STDs by sleeping with multiple females in different apartment complexes. And it got real evil real quick on methamphetamine in the 90s. So while high, I got on a plane and I moved back flew back into Baltimore and got back up with my gang, but I was homeless. And then I went to the military in a last ditch effort to change my life. And my parents allowed me to move back into the home. I got a job as a chef. I mean, as a dishwasher in a restaurant, and it was cool. I liked it. Now I'm in the Virginia Army National Guard because I'm colorblind. Supplies unit. So I'm working. I'm like Forrest Gump, taking apart guns, looking at the serial numbers, putting them back real quick. And then I didn't want to stop getting high.
Yeah.
So I got kicked out. I got discharged from the military. My parents kicked me out. My mother it broke her heart. Now I'm homeless again. Now I'm setting up equipment for bands in the DC area. It's called go-go music. My gang had a band as well. So I'm traveling around just for somewhere to stay. Again, just sleeping around, all these situations that are happening. And then there's a few instances at these clubs where I almost got beat to death in Washington, D.C. And the police just sat there and smoked their cigarettes while they're beating the brakes off my little behind. And I kept using and drinking about it. Then I was catching resentments because somebody, and they didn't sit there and fight with me. And then another occasion where I got hit in the head with the police smack light and they broke my skull and I had a stroke. But I didn't know I had a stroke because the hospital just sent us away because there was too many black individuals in this hospital in Virginia. And I don't know what was going on because they were stitching my skull up and I got a dent in my head. And one of my big brothers in the gang was in there with me. He wouldn't allow the person that did it to me on accident to come in the room, but I could hear it. I just couldn't talk.
Hmm.
But the hospital just sent me away with no CAT scan, no CT scan, no anything, no MRI, no paperwork.
Wow.
I started doing dope. I started doing cocaine, real heavy, getting females pregnant. They're calling me left and right that they're having my kids, and I was lost. I didn't know what to do at that point. And once I found out that one of those babies was mine, instead of being a reliable man, I put a scream mask on from that movie Scream. I dressed in all black like the Omen, and this was what I'm telling myself back then in 1999 when my daughter was born, and I attempted a jewelry store heist outside of Washington D.C. against my own spirit because I knew something bad was going to happen and they were going to tell on me. So I ran to Florida. I slept around with some women that I had just met, passed around some STDs, got some more, got high, got drunk, went back to Virginia when my father said he was going to lose his security clearance at the Pentagon because I'm a known gang member and I'm a felon and they're looking for me. So I turned myself in for somebody else, and that felt good. And being incarcerated was a long story, and my book explains everything that happened when I was incarcerated and when my two brothers testified me in court on me in court and pointed me out. I became super homicidal, and I'm still real slow because of stroke. I'm taking precautions, not trying to be tough as much as I used to be. But they testified me, and it broke my heart. And it just I don't know how to handle being sad and depressed, so I fueled that with vengeance. So I had homicidal ideation for 13 years, waking up thinking about murdering somebody. And some situations happened after that. I got a job at a pool company, got up with another beautiful female, and she had an apartment with two other girls that went to George Mason University. And I ended up selling ecstasy pills and doing a lot of ecstasy. But when her and I split up, it really broke my heart. And I became a crack fiend, smoking crack. And I got kidnapped in the woods of Gainesville, Nokesville, and Gainesville area near Manassas, where I was incarcerated. And these guys hit me in the head where I already had a stroke, so it debilitated me. And then they beat me with a cinder block, and I defecated on myself. And they dragged me to the truck. And this whole time, I'm just trying to figure out how to stop what I'm doing so I could be there for my daughter and her mom. And they let me go on the phone rang. So they drove off the paved road onto a dirt road onto no road, and I'm in the back with the dude with the gun. And these are 50-year-old gentlemen from Maryland, these gang members, and they like me, but they wanted their money. And the woman I was sleeping with, who's much older than me, was that was going to bring the money to them. And she ended up calling right before they were going to do whatever they were going to do to me in the woods. And I would have thought that would have changed my life, them letting me go. But the insanity of the disease of addiction is 15 minutes after I cleaned myself, I went back to smoking crack. And a few years later, I went to Louisiana with another female that I'd met that got me away from that lifestyle. And I moved with her to Shreveport, Louisiana with her mom, leaving my daughter and her mom behind. So a lot of depression, but the thought of getting clean in a different state was amazing. The reality was tricky. And when I got a job at a pool company in Shreveport, Louisiana, the guys that was on the work crew, they were smoking dope in the state. And that's just the way my life went. Anything that was my desire that I was trying to walk away from was going to be presented to me very plainly, and and it was going to happen often. So I became a full blown crack addict in Louisiana. My girlfriend at the time had no idea I was a drug addict because I was such a bad alcoholic.
Mhm.
And when Katrina hit and Hurricane Rita hit, I was like, man, let's go back to Arizona where my father left the military. My father was in the Pentagon in 9/11. I didn't even care because I needed more cocaine. I was there for Hurricane Katrina, and though we were north in Louisiana, there was a lot going on, but I didn't care because I needed more dope. We went to Arizona, and I started cleaning pools and building pools out here. And people are like, "You could cook your butt off, so why don't you try going to the Art Institute?" And I was like, "You know what? I can do that." So I excelled in that, and I became a chef at the Ritz Carlton in Marana in the mountains, which was very spiritual to me. Again, I got the
Oh, yeah.
sixth sense, good spirits, bad spirits. I've had them all around me my entire life. And then I picked up a drink, one drink, and I got a DUI at a strip club with one of my relatives out here. They've been out here forever, man. And I got so depressed. At this time, I have a son with my wife, and she's pregnant with another. And I walked away from being a chef at the Ritz Carlton, and I walked away from being a student at the Art Institute, and I walked away from being a father and a husband and a son. And I walked away into the darkness of methamphetamine, and I put the alcohol down, and I became a full blown methamphetamine addict. And I lost my mind. I was in and out of mental hospitals. I was 107 pounds as a 34-year-old man. I was running the streets with axes, machetes. I went suicide by cop, but they didn't kill me. They hogtied me and threw me in a psych hospital. I almost murdered somebody that loves me dearly with a machete because I'm a sick dude when I get on that stuff. And the devil rejoices in everything that I do while I'm doing that. And I was a pervert, and I was around perverted women, so I wouldn't stick out, and I wouldn't be that person. They're like, yo, this dude's too weird. So I went around weird individuals, so I fit right in. Meantime, I got a loving wife trying to do everything she can to raise my two sons. Meanwhile, I have a daughter in Virginia that I'm trying to forget about because I don't want to hurt like they're hurting. So I manipulated my own mind on methamphetamine to completely forget about my family so I would just die. And I was going to commit suicide in 2000 after the suicide by cop attempt, but I was going to jump in front of a moving vehicle in front of the psych hospital. And I ended up walking around that institution for 2 hours. And I walked in and I openly and willingly took medications that the doctors prescribed me. And I stayed there for weeks. And my wife brought my two sons there. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try this thing out one more time. I'm tired of being incarcerated. I'm tired of being a patient. I'm tired of starving while being incarcerated. I'm 107 to 113 pounds, and I can't get food after 4 p.m. That really took its toll on me because when I drink and I use, I don't eat. I'm one of those guys that just does not eat. I could be
Mhm.
anywhere with the best chefs on the planet throwing down barbecue in Kansas City or here down by Mexico eating the best authentic Mexican food. If I take a drink, there's no eating for me.
Mhm.
But when I could not have the opportunity to eat when I wanted to, when I was incarcerated, it changed my life. So I went back to the Salvation Army rehab for men, and they allowed me to go back in after AWOLing twice. And on March 1st, 2013, I gave my life to Christ, and I moved out of my own way, and I got a sponsor in the 12-step fellowship, and I'm still here. I'll be 9 years clean on February 10th. Coming up, I'm a father of five. I'm an advocate in Tucson, Arizona, for men, women, and children that suffer from mental illness, that don't know how to talk, that don't know how to listen, that don't know how to act, that don't know how to handle situations which baffle them. So I ended up working in a psych hospital where I used to be a patient at as an advocate for four years. And then I've been working in the rehabilitation centers with adults for the last five.
Wow.
Wow.
That's really incredible, man. Like, thank you so much for
What a
sharing your story.
story.
Like, we're sitting here, we're the worst podcast hosts ever. We're just sitting here so enthralled, like we're like hanging on the whole thing. So, first and foremost, thank you for sharing your story.
Hmm.
That's really empowering. I know, Melanie, you've worked in a field with a lot of interviewing and a lot of trauma.
Hmm.
So, what do you think? What's your big takeaway from the stories that we just heard?
I mean, I've heard a lot of stories. I've heard a lot of really dark stories. So my my favorite thing from your story is the perseverance. You know, every time you got knocked down, you got back up, and it wasn't always necessarily the most healthy or the most graceful way of getting up, but you still got up and you kept fighting, and you were just trying to navigate through all of the messiest of experiences, and your journey was one of the most difficult that I've personally heard. And to be where you are now, and to be coming up on 9 years of being sober, that is such an accomplishment. That is huge. So congratulations to you. I'm sure it's not easy, and a lot of people who don't have the history, a lot of people who have never been around somebody who has struggled with addiction, they might not necessarily realize how difficult that is. There are a lot of components with addiction as well, obviously mental health being one of the biggest ones. When you were getting health in your rehab facility, was there a lot of counseling, like group counseling, or did you have to go through like individualized therapies and things like that? Was it a mixture of those things, or something else?
Yeah, so Salvation Army is much, much different. It is so structured. Most people won't do it. And it's around the planet. It's just not people ringing the bell for Thanksgiving and handing
Hmm.
out turkeys. It happened in Europe 100 and something years ago. And then what happens is we go in there, we work 8 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
For me, I couldn't, to thine own self be true. I didn't want to be around females. I knew that that would knock me immediately. I mean, walking in the door, if there's females walking around in the rehab and they have cell phones, then I'm just gonna walk around and try to impregnate them, regardless if I was married or not, because that was part of my addiction.
Mhm.
So at the Salvation Army, to answer your question, it's wake up in the morning, shave your face, look good, put in a collared shirt, tuck it in, lace your boots, get a good meal, and go to work for 8 hours a day. No smoke breaks. Then you get a smoke break if you smoke. Then you eat. Then you go to group counseling with these men, and then you go to chapel, and then you do it over and over and over again, having to have a sponsor within 30 days or they boot you back to the street. So it was all men's group counseling. It was one-on-one therapy. It was talking to the individuals that have been running the Salvation Army. There's colonels and majors. And that's how they run it there. But we as the men, we're the ones that run the program.
Hmm.
You got
Okay.
86 men from all walks of life. I mean, it's a big deal. Like, I'm not a Cowboys fan by any means,
Hmm.
but they're stamped on the Cowboys field, the Salvation Army. Like, it is a big
Wow.
freaking deal. So that one-on-one therapy, it was difficult for me again because it was a female therapist. My mind was going the whole entire time. But the more I went to church, the more I spoke to these men of God, the more that went away, and I was able to not try to show off for her. And then it ended up being a boundaries. We focused everything down to boundaries because I didn't know how to have boundaries. I didn't know what a boundary
Mhm.
was. It looked like a
Mhm.
fence, but I didn't know
Right.
what a true boundary was. And it's saying no
Mhm.
without apologizing and thinking about your answer before you do it out of impulse.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So that structure is what allows me to do what I do today. Still, is from that Salvation Army, and then ending up going to church every Wednesday after that and attending my 12-step meetings.
That's awesome, man. Like
Wow.
it's really just empowering to hear because it's the hearing the success story. It's not something you hear very often. A lot of people always hear the falling off the wagon stories, the falling back into old habits, but like you're doing it and it's
Mhm.
inspiring. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your book, The Book of Joel?
So the Book of Joel, I started writing in 2015 when it was necessary for me to get a level one fingerprint clearance card to work with children and vulnerable adults. And I'm not an educated guy, nor did I ever want to be when it came to academics. But when I was doing that, I had to write a summary on all the situations around the country that I'd been in contact with law enforcement, even if I wasn't convicted. So while I was doing that on my mother-in-law's laptop, I'm like, man, you're pretty good. So 2015 in August, I started writing. I wrote the first chapter in a week. Then I jumped off for 6 months.
Hmm.
Then I just kept writing it, writing it, writing it. And it's my testimony from Friday the 13th, October 1978 to now. Just a timeline of the mental stress that I have endured in the past 30, 43 years and how I managed all those situations, not so righteously, while believing in God, but never following Him. Go do the devil's work, but I got a Jesus piece on.
Hmm.
I mean, thou shalt not kill on my leg, but some of the things I was doing did not represent an all loving God. So I wanted individuals in rehabs, mental institutions, incarcerated, family members that don't understand why their father continues to drink, why their mother is selling her body for dope, while people are continuously running away, like the loved ones are a very important part of this whole picture. My daughter,
Mhm.
she's 22 years old. She's a beautiful woman. And yes, she met her four brothers that I have here with me in Tucson when I flew to DC with my entire family, which was a blessing in itself. But I wanted to write this book so she could understand who I used to be and why I did what I did. Think about my daughter every day of my life. There's no taking back me not choosing her and her mom over a lifestyle in which I ran away from my parents and never found anything that I wanted. I ran away from home looking for something and I never found it. And I tapped out 2013, went straight back to my mama and daddy's house. Like that's some wild stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I'm done. I didn't find what I wanted. It's in your home. It's your love. It's wild stuff. But my book is a play by play of what that is. And the demon on the front represents the demonic entity in Europe when I was a child. And I'm handcuffed to a chair in the middle of a tornado. But that also represents me looking myself in the face, being the demonic battle that it was within myself my entire life. And look, I'm gonna tell y'all, I've had a lot of situations since I've been clean that baffled me. I had a son in 2015 that was dying in front of me when my wife gave birth to him. 2 years into my sobriety, that was the day that I learned that there's never no powerlessness on this planet if you have prayer.
Mhm.
He's 7 years old today. He loves playing Little League Baseball. 5 years old, my other son was diagnosed with cancer. He's 9 years old.
Wow.
He plays basketball and he is good. And when I mean he's good, I'm not just saying that, you know what I mean? Like he can ball. But he's in a very competitive league now because some people that I know that are connected to the University of Arizona were like, just come have if you're talking him up like that, bring him over. And they got him on that league immediately.
Oh,
And he
wow.
deals with what
Wow.
he deals with. You know, my 12-year-old son, he's got some health issues as well, but he's a model. He's gonna go to Los Angeles to do the catwalk, and just like myself, he looks like he should be in a grade 4 years before what he is right now.
Wow.
That
What a legacy.
Yeah, seriously, that's really cool, man. Like, and just again, it's so empowering, it's so inspiring. So we're running a little low on time, so I want to ask my favorite question that I like to ask. What's next? Like, what's in the future for you, Joel?
I want to get this book on film.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I want to get this book on the TV, the story, I should say, on the television, so people can see what somebody can go through, but overcome it
Hmm.
and still deal with it every day. It just didn't go away. Life didn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just being able to handle these situations instead of running away all the time, just standing there and where I'm at right now in my life, slowing down while the planet gets faster.
Mm.
Talking about humanity, not the earth itself. It's so
Mm-hmm.
fast paced. Everything is going. I'm in the mode right now in the season of growth of just slowing it down, being in the moment, analyzing everything that's happening in the moment, and doing the best I can as that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. And for anybody who's curious about getting your book, because first of all, we would watch that movie, just so you know, like,
Oh, absolutely. Just everything that you explained tonight, and reading through the blurb and everything earlier. I have so many more questions. I want to know. I want to know how certain things happen, and I have so many more questions, but I can't. We don't have time to do it right now.
we'll get the
What's
book.
that?
We'll get the book. It's fine.
No,
We'll get
I want to watch. I want to watch the movie
you want to
too.
watch the movie too?
I want to watch the
Yes.
movie. I want to read the book.
Want to have another interview.
Oh
So
yeah.
now we officially just asked you to come back. So now you got time to get
Thank
ready
you.
for it.
Yeah, always love to have follow-ups.
But for anybody who wants to get your book, I believe fultonbooks.com is the place to get it.
Fulton Books, my publisher, Amazon, Amazon Kindle. The audio book will be out in a month or two. I'll definitely be putting that out because a lot of people want that. Just did a book signing at Barnes and Noble. So Barnes and Noble,
Oh,
if you
cool.
type my name, Joel Caroll, and the book of Joel, Cunning, Baffling, and Powerful, you can get it anywhere. Walmart, Target, it's out there.
Well, if
Awesome.
you are ever in New York doing a book signing, please let us know because we would love to meet you in person and get a copy signed.
Yeah.
So that's going to wrap us up though for tonight, Joel.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for taking the time out. Like seriously, it was really just such a powerful message, such a powerful episode. So we really want to thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you guys. I
Uh,
appreciate it.
we
Thank you
do
so much.
too. Have a good rest of your
Thank you
night. All
so
right.
much.
You as well.